Hey guys, this is Tauna and welcome to the ultimate guide to Final Fantasy drafting by myself. So this is my guide to drafting Final Fantasy. I'm aiming towards making this good for both newer players and for veterans. And I'm going to be going over the archetypes, some color analysis, and what my thoughts on each color combination are, and what you should potentially use. So I'm going to actually give suggestions of what I think you should look at drafting, more so than, if I was doing a pre-release kind of thing. I'm aiming towards helping you guys get the most out of your drafting experience, as well as mostly focusing around the common and uncommons, as those are you're more likely to see. But given it's drafting, we can start looking more at the rares because you can actually selectively get them potentially too. So what is a draft? Very quickly, for those who don't know how to draft, you will open a booster of Final Fantasy. When you get that, you're going to set aside the art or the token card, and then you get to choose one of those cards in that rest of the cards and put it aside for yourself. That is your card now. You'll then take the rest of your cards, you're going to pass them over to your left, and then the person to your right is going to pass you a bunch of cards. And you'll do the same. You'll take one, pass them across, etc. And you'll repeat until all of the cards in the pack are gone. Then you'll open a second pack and do the same thing, this time passing them to your right, taking the ones from your left, drafting, etc. And then finally a third pack where you'll do the same but going back to the left. So in the end, you'll end up with cards from each of the packs. You'll get 36 cards or something along those lines. You're going to get, a whole bunch of mixed cards, but this way you can actually aim towards getting the cards that you want to build your own deck, right? You can build a deck how you like it because you're going to get to selectively choose the cards from each of these packs that's coming across in front of you. So, some simple draft tips. Locking in what you are wanting to aim towards early is a very good idea, but don't be afraid to switch if you need it. If you're getting, your first pack, you find a really great rare from it, you pick it up, someone passes you it, and then it's an even better thing. Don't be afraid to switch. You've got a while before you need to actually start, locking in entirely what you want to do. Throughout the first pack, you can kind of start debating more. By the second pack, you kind of want to start locking it in more because by then you're kind of getting to the point that you really want to make sure you get those synergies. And this set is incredibly synergistic. There is some stuff where you can kind of splash out into a third color, for example, but this set is a very two-color based set in my opinion. And I think that two colors work best. I'm going to be suggesting some archetypes later, as I said, that I like the most, but don't be afraid to kind of draft for your collection. If something comes across and you're like, I really want this for my commander deck, don't be afraid to draft it, but don't neuter your whole drafting experience purely to do that, because then you're going to end up with a really potentially awful deck of all mix match stuff that you're then not going to be able to actually play very well with, which kind of, the drafting's fun, but you're not drafting to kind of, make your money back kind of thing, in my opinion. There's usually prizes as well if you go well in the draft, so you don't want to kind of lose out on prizes because you were just purely drafting for your commander decks. So, before we do, start things though, I do want to cover a niche interaction that is relevant to a few of these decks. So one thing is these new Saga creatures, right? As you go along at the beginning of your first main phase, essentially, it's after your draw step, you're going to put a lore counter on. Now, when it gets down to here, the last chapter, and you put on however many lore counters that is, so in this example 3, you will then sacrifice that creature, which means it's gone, it goes into the graveyard. There's obviously ways to be able to bring it back. However, what if instead of it going there, we just made it so that, one, you could use something like Ambrosia to send it back to your hand. Now you can cast it again. Really great. You can actually cast this with Flash. So once you get the third chapter on here, you do this ability, and then the sacrifice for it goes onto the stack. You cast in Ambrosia, and boom, now you bounce it back to your hand. You still got all of this, but you managed to get the card back to your hand so you can cast it again. Vincent's Limit Break as well will enable you to do this, because whenever it gets sacrificed, it is technically dying. So it will get sacrificed, it'll go to the graveyard. However, then it returns to the battlefield tapped under your control. A great card. I really love Vincent's Limit Break. You can cast it for just the 1 in the black if you're just doing it for this. But basically, what I'm trying to get at is, while these summon Saga creatures are really great, they're even better when you find ways to bypass the fact they're going to send themselves to the graveyard. So, building a deck. Let's go over to the color combinations. First up, we've got Boros here. Boros is very much about equipment. You're going to be looking at mostly huge amounts of equipment here. You can also include some of red. Red has a whole bunch of, when you cast non-creature spells, do XYZ. They work really well here. You kind of want to focus on one or the other though. Like, you don't want to focus on those non-creature spells, but then include a whole bunch of creatures. It doesn't work very well. You don't want to muddle it too much there. You're mostly going to have mono white or red cards, but there's a huge amount of great synergies between the two of them. Stuff like Samurai's Katana is really great here because it gives a creature, like creates a creature with this job select mechanic, which is essentially when you cast the equipment, when it enters, you're going to create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, and then you attach it to it. So this could essentially say you're going to play, you're paying 3, you're going to create a 3/3 creature, a hero samurai with trample and haste. That's pretty decent. This equip cost, obviously the equip costs are pretty annoying. However, there are ways within the set to be able to bypass some stuff like weapons vendor, which is a common or uncommon. That's just pay 1 to equip it onto something else. Really, really great card. We've got Dragoon's Lance. It gives something +1/+0, which is good. However, it gives it flying. That is incredibly dangerous, incredibly annoying, because now they've got a 2/1 flyer on their turn that's like, you know, constantly pinging you. They can move their other equipment onto this flyer as well, which I've seen. They like, you know, move their equipment, so then you've got just one big creature with a huge amount of equipment flying over top of you. We've got Gilgamesh, Master at Arms, into the rares here. It's great because he's going to, whenever he enters or attacks, you get to grab a whole bunch of equipment out of your deck, out of the top 6 cards of your deck, put any number of them onto the battlefield, and then you get to equip one of them onto a samurai. He's a samurai. So you get to equip one onto him for free, which is really good. And then finally, we've got Joshua, and Joshua is insane. I really think that if you open a pack with Joshua, you really ought to take it if you can potentially, like, you know, if it's not too late to kind of switch over to Boros or like, you know, Boros plus one other color, potentially like splash into another color. But he is great, especially once you get him down to here, because he's going to return things from your graveyard to the battlefield. Even if he was just this, you know, cost 3, discard 2, draw 2 potentially, and then for 3/4, that's still pretty decent in my opinion. We've got Rakdos. So this is lots of wizards or wizard token generators that are going to burn. So whenever you cast a non-creature, again, that is non-creature, which means that all of those yummy equipments are all going to trigger this as well. Keep in mind, card draw as you're kind of doing it, because you may potentially burn through your cards really quickly if you get a whole bunch of really cheap things. You want to make sure that you have ways to be able to get some card draw and stuff too. There's like a really nice Sephiroth's Revelation, I think it is, that's like, look at the top 3, put 1 into your hand, 2 into the graveyard. I really like that card. Again, you know, non-creature, so equipments count for this. Any artifacts work for it as well, which is really good. So Kuja is like our, like if you can get a Kuja and you're building this, this is going to go incredibly well for you, because he's going to create this black wizard creature token that burns whenever you cast a non-creature spell. But when he flips over, he then increases that to double. If you can take an equipment as well, like a, say a Red Mage's Rapier, put it onto Kuja, now you've got this guy who's going to, if he hits someone, you cast a non-creature spell, he gets +2, right? So then he's a 6/6 that's dealing 12 if he deals damage to someone, like in combat or something, which is great. We've got Choco Comet here. Oh boy. This is just, now you can dump all your mana into this huge burn spell, whether you use it as removal or you deal it straight to someone's face. It's great. We've got Overkill, a great removal card, bypasses any indestructibles or anything that someone might happen to have somehow, but still a good kind of removal spell. And, you know, it's going to trigger all those deal 1 damage things. And then finally, Cornered by Black Mage, it creates that wizard, but also makes an opponent sacrifice a creature. They could sacrifice a token, sure, but given the fact that their token likely potentially has an equipment equipped to it, that's still a decent thing, right? Like they need to equip that equipment somewhere else later on, but still. Into Izzet here, we've got a lot of nice control in this set, specifically around blue. Red doesn't really have too much, but blue has a lot. You can aim to cast more 4 mana plus spells with this. That's what you want to aim towards, but you don't necessarily need to. Even Shantoto here, she doesn't care too much if it's 4 mana or more. You get card draw if it's 4 mana or more, but even if you cast something that's 2, she's still getting +2/+0 until end of turn. Again, this is non-creature, so equipment still count. You can add some of those red burn mages we just talked about there in here to deal damage out. So it's going to be the black wizards, but they're created by red cards and stuff. Like there's a chick who creates it whenever she attacks, she creates one. Great card here. And flashback really works well here because you flashback, say, the like one that creates a robot or something, and boom, now all of a sudden you've got another robot and you've cast something that's 4 mana or greater, so you get the triggers there too. So Shantoto here, I talked briefly about her. If you cast something that's big, you get to draw a card. If not, she still is getting buffed as well. We've got Ice Magic and a great removal spell. This one's really, really annoying too. You're most likely going to cast it for 4 to make someone put something on the top of their deck. That was great for when I did draft. Someone used it against me, removed my Death Touch blocker, and I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to draw it next turn, which is good, but I kind of wanted it out here to be a blocker. Even if you just cast it for 1 a blue, that's still returning something to someone's hand. If you do it on something big, like or something they've got a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters on because they're playing like the green landfall deck or something, it's really good. We've got the Lunar Whale. So Lunar Whale costs 4, so it's going to trigger that because it is a vehicle, an artifact. It lets you cast from the top of your deck. You can also crew this with your little red mages if you get them. Oh, no, they need to be 1 power. I guess just any of your little things you can crew it with, like a hero token or something. And then Choco Comet again, finally. We talked about that briefly before. Golgari. So Golgari is a very interesting deck. You want a mix of like Surveil, milling yourself, just getting cards into your graveyard, but then also you want stuff to get triggers from that stuff either going into the graveyard or coming back out of the graveyard. If you manage to get a Sir Conrad, so Sir Conrad is in the bonus sheet as Golbez. If you manage to get one, this is an amazing, amazing deck. You want ways to be able to bring things back from your graveyard or remove cards from your graveyard, sure. And this one here is a great deck that you can splash a little bit of blue in and then get Sin Spara's punishment, I think it is. And then you'll get the triggers from things leaving your graveyard. He gets to reanimate things. Well, he's not technically reanimate. He exiles it from your graveyard, creates a token copy of it, but still good. We've got Summer Primal Odin here. So if we've got like the control-ish kind of stuff, this is going to work great, especially if you can manage to get to this part. You control your opponent's stuff, and then you manage to get that trigger off, boom, now you're going to get through, make them lose the game, essentially. You can also reanimate this. You get it into your graveyard, bring it back somehow. It's great. We've got Esper Origins here. Surveil 2, gain 2 life. That's great. It does what we want. Then it's also got flashback, so now we can cast it from our graveyard too. We've got Cloud of Darkness here. So it's got flying, and then when it enters, it's going to deal, like, it doesn't even deal damage. It just gives something -X, where X is the permanent cards in your graveyard. There's like a Spara's Reinforcements, I think it is, which is mill 3, gain 3 life or something, which is great card here. And then we've got Vanille, Cheerful Ice. I don't know how to pronounce that still. Great because it's mill, and then you get to return something from your graveyard. You can also do the whole, merge it together with the Fang. You don't necessarily need to, but it's a funny thing to do because now you've got these huge this huge creature, Ragnarok. Into Azorius. If you're drafting Azorius, you want a heap of artifacts. That's all you want to do is look at artifacts. The great thing is that you can get artifact creatures, or you can get the job select stuff, which is an artifact and a creature, because you play the artifact and then it brings in a hero token. There is some stuff to hero tokens, some nice flyers here as well. There's one that's like whenever an artifact enters, discard a card and draw a card, or draw a card then discard a card, which is great. Stuff like Ash as well to provide card advantage whenever she attacks. You get to get a artifact from like the top 5, I think it is, of your deck. So we've got White Auracite. I love this. It's a removal. It's a mana rock. It costs 4, which is a little bit annoying in regards to the cost, but still, it's a mana rock. So you get to, and it's exile non-land permanent too. We've got Magitech Armor. Brings you in an artifact, brings you in a hero. What more do you want? Dragoon's Lance, again, same reason, because it's a great artifact. It's going to be able to be a flying attacker. This time it's because it's an artifact rather than being an equipment, but still, it's an equipment still. And then finally, we've got Dragoon's Wyvern here, which is going to create a hero when it comes in, but it's a 2/1 flyer. We can just play it. It's going to fly over top of people. It's also creating that hero token that we could use for whatever we want to. We've got Orzhov. So there's some nice sacrifice payoffs and outlets here, which is what you're mostly going to be aiming. The interesting thing with Orzhov as well is there's a lot of really nice Orzhov legends that synergize well together. Like you've got Judge Magistrate Gabranth here, which is when something dies, but then you've also got like Squall who reanimates something that you can then, sacrifice again. If you manage to get a Sephiroth because you got insanely lucky, then you can use that really well. And there's some amazing synergies you can do here. You can also add in a whole bunch of tokens because this works off of artifacts or creatures dying. So if you sacrifice, like if you have the Dragon's Lance, for example, that's an artifact and a creature. That is potentially like, 2 triggers if you have like a phantom train out to sacrifice both of them. There's lots of really great things that you can work together like well here. So as I said, the Dragon's Lance, that is a hero and an artifact. You can sacrifice both of them to whatever you want. We've got side quest Hunt the Mark here. When it comes in, destroy something and then create a treasure. The treasure getting sacrificed is you sacrificing / an artifact dying. So that's great. And if you manage to flip this into Yzmat here, you should just win the game, to be honest. That is crazy. We've got Zach Fair here, sacrifices himself, gives something indestructible. It does attach an equipment, which we don't care too much about. It's just the sacrificing himself that's really nice. As well as, you can play him on turn 1 as a 1/2 blocker. And then we've got Squall, as I said, about reanimation. This part here really catches people off guard. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets double strike. So that means if you swing in with Squall, right? You swing in with just Squall. He's got double strike. He doesn't get blocked. You deal damage twice. You get to reanimate 2 things because he dealt combat damage twice with mana value 3 or less. It's really good. We've got Simic here. So this is focusing around towns and ramping out. There's lots of chocobos, lots of extra land cards that you want. Stuff like, whenever you play a, what is it? It's like this Shupeth or something like that. Whenever you play a land, you get to pull a +1/+1 counter on something. That's great. Just making use of those lands. You can also cast some big creatures as well. Some big, like those big creature sagas. So we've got Saz here who lets you tutor up a bird or a basic land. Great. You can also potentially splash into white here if you do go this, and then you can use Choco and then just go double down on all your birds. And then he gets to double the counters on something, which is amazing whenever he attacks. You get to summon Titan. So mill 5, then you get to return all those lands at once. That's like, if you've got 3 lands in your graveyard, you get to bring all of those back. This is also just return all lands, not even from the ones that he milled. So if you've managed to get lands into your graveyard somehow else, boom, you get to bring them back. And then you get to buff something up down here too. We've got summon Fenrir, tutor up a land, buff something up, and then draw a card. All things that you want to do in this deck. And then finally, Ignis Sentia here lets you get a land from the top of 6 of your library, put it onto the battlefield, put the rest at the bottom. You can also exile a card from a graveyard. Keep in mind that's a graveyard, so that can be an opponent's graveyard. If you're versus like a Golgari deck with this, you can exile something they're trying to bring back or something, especially because you can do this at instant speed. And then you get to create a food token because you just turn their summon Primal Odin into food, because that's hilarious. We got Selesnya. So Selesnya is technically meant to be go wide. I don't think it necessarily needs to just be go wide. I think you could do Saga creatures and just go into a whole bunch of really heavy landfall, land ramping, and then play those big Saga creatures. You could also go into like Legendaries Matters. There's a bunch of green and white legendaries that work well together. If you wanted to go that way, you could kind of splash a little bit of black or splash a little bit of red to go with like Sagas or with like Orzhov Legends or something like that. There's ways that you can do to splash a little bit there. I think that, green, white, personally, it works okay. Renoa's pretty decent. She's going to buff something up whenever she attacks. Unfortunately, it's not counters onto it, but still, it still can be pretty good if you've got a big board going. We've got Mughal's Valor here. For each creature you control, you get to create another creature, Mughal with lifelink, and then you get to give indestructible everything. There's not a huge amount of board wipes things, but if, you've got a big board, you can use this to essentially double your board, which is great. We've got Dion, Bahamut's dominant here, so he's going to, create his boyfriend when he comes in, which is great. That also will have flying. These two will both have flying, so that's an extra creature, right? But then when he flips over, he's going to give counters out to all your creatures, so if you're going wide with, a Selesnya deck here, you're going to make a huge amount of counters onto things, as well as give them all flying, which is great, right? Like, that's really, really good. We've got Saz Katsuroi here again, you know, tutor up that bird, tutor up a basic land, whatever you want, but also double the counters on something. Into Gruul, we've got Landfall. So Landfall really goes very, very quickly, and it's what I've been enjoying a lot. It's not necessarily the best thing, but it's still really, really fun. You've got lots of synergies with your Chocobo. One thing that I don't think people realize was the side quest Razor Chocobo. You need to get 4 Chocobos out, roll 4 birds out before it's going to flip. Once it flips, the bird on the other side is actually pretty bonkers because it's not the same as the normal birds. It instead gives +1/+0 to all your birds, which is pretty great. So lots of synergies with the Chocobos, but also you've got like a big Sagas that you can ramp into here as well. You're going to get lots of lands out very, very quickly. So Saz, again, I don't need to explain him. Summon Titan, again, don't need to explain that, why that's here, because it's just landfall. Summon Fenrir, again, more lands, and Choco Comet. Like, all of the things that are in here are things that are going to go into other decks. It's just that in this deck, it's where you bring them all together and focus more on the Chocobos, focus more on getting a whole bunch of lands out. Kind of similar to what the Towns deck is doing, but instead of where you're focusing more around Towns there, you're going to focus more around just getting a huge amount of lands out this time. Dimir is interesting because while they said it's about control, it's also just about card advantage with control aspects to it too. There's also some, you know, artifact synergies here. So some black removal that you can use to kind of do that control-y kind of stuff. There's also flashback stuff that works really well with the surveil stuff here as well. Astrologian's Planisphere here is great because whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you're slowly growing. And because we're in a control deck, we're playing a slower, more steady game. So we're just going to slowly kind of build that up. As well as, you know, stuff like, you know, Lock here is draw cards. This is off the 3rd card you draw as well, which you're not going to get a huge amount of triggers for, but you're still going to get them. This is still like pretty good. Like, it's just a permanent prowess anytime you cast a non-creature spell. We've got Summon Primal Odin, which we talked about before, but in this deck, because we've got that kind of more control-y stuff, we can control down our opponents, hopefully get rid of all of their creatures right before we get to this stage 2, then swing in and kill them. We've got Overkill. Yeah, I don't need to explain why that's in a control deck. And then Sleep Magic. I really like Sleep Magic, right? So you're going to tap an enchanted creature and it's not going to untap. Now, the reason that this one only costs 1 as opposed to the other one that's stuck in Summoner's Quarters, I think it is, or something like that. This one costs 1 because if the creature is dealt damage, you're going to sacrifice this aura. Not a lot of people are going to ping their own creature. Which is about the only way it's going to deal damage because it's going to be tapped, right? So they need to ping their own creature or somehow deal a damage to their creature, which isn't, in my opinion, going to happen very often. Most of the time, it's just going to stay tapped forever, and you paid 1 blue to remove their creature, essentially. So what colors to draft and why? First, do you guys like the content so far? Make sure you subscribe, make sure you share the video around, you know, help my small channel out. We are currently at 16,400 plus subscribers. My aim is to hit 25,000 by the end of the year. So if you guys could help, that would be amazing. We have a Discord that's slowly growing as well. So make sure you check that out too. So my top 3 suggestions, first of all, is Izzet. Not necessarily Spellslinger, but non-creature focus. There is a lot of nice 4-mana job select cards that work really well for it, or 4-mana plus. Even like the ones that are a little bit below that still are great. Like that Astrologian's Plane, the one that was just here. That's only 2. But in this deck, it's still going to go really well. You don't necessarily need to focus on just the 4-mana plus stuff. Any kind of non-creatures is going to be great in this deck, in my opinion. Blue has some amazing control that allows you to then rip through people. Even like, you know, the bouncing someone's equipment back to their hand, or if you bounce their token back to their hand, right, then their token ceases to exist, and then boom, now they've just got the equipment sitting out. It's as good as a card draw, like it's good as a removal spell. Shantoto and the Emperor are really great too. They're both uncommons that just synergize really well together. You know, we don't necessarily get that in all the colors, but these two definitely synergize really, really well together. We've got Golgari. There is lots of great synergies as well with Golgari, especially with some of the bonus cards. Like, as I said about Golbez as Sir Conrad really works crazy with this. You want to make sure that you have a mix of those mill cards, graveyard recursion, graveyard Madisy kind of cards. As I said, you can splash into a little bit of blue to get Sin Spira, Spira's Punishment in there too. You can make use of the Saga creatures as well with Vincent's Limit Break to make sure you bring them back. Flashback is great here. That Esper Origins is crazy great. And then finally we've got Boros. Boros is just insanely aggro. I witnessed someone play Firion, and then they played, I can't remember what it was. They played another equipment, and then you played that. I think it was like the Samurai's one. You play that, you get that, and then you get a token copy of it. That token copy comes in with Firion, and then it creates another one that it's attached to. So now you've got 2 of these 3/3 trample hasters, which is just bonkers, right? It creates a lot of token heroes with a job select cards, has just, enough removal as well to deal with things to make sure your creatures aren't blocked. Joshua is absolutely huge, really brings Boros to the next level if you can get him. Honestly, I think that Giot, this guy here, this uncommon, is maybe the worst part of Boros. Like, he does stuff with your equipments, but it's not what your equipments necessarily want to do. I guess unless you've got Joshua, in which case you can then use the reanimation, I guess, but still. So many other pluses for Boros that this is just such a minor thing. It's just me nitpicking, basically. Now, as I said before, the set really does lend itself to 3-color decks as well, as there's some synergies between the colors. I think splashing a 3rd color isn't a bad idea, but I do think that going 2 colors for draft is better, as the set is very synergistic with those 2 colors. It's kind of like, you have the 2 colors and then you splash a little bit of, as I said about Golgari splashing a little bit of blue. That's fine. You could go go Gruul and then splash a little bit of blue to have some of that town cares stuff. There's a few different things there. Like Selesnya splashing a little bit of black to have some of the sacrifice stuff. Like, there's just a bunch of things that can synergize well there, and splashing a little bit of those extra colors isn't a bad idea. When I say splashing, by the way, I'm referring to having 2-3 cards that care about that, and maybe having the towns as your lands or something. It's basically not having your whole third of your deck be that other color. So the bonus sheet, there's some absolute bangers on this bonus sheet, and that's something that could easily shape what deck you build. With my most recent draft, when I went to my LGS, for example, in one of my packs, I opened Primeval Titan. Primeval Titan got past me, that's right. And I was already partially on the Gruul train for landfall. Boom, Primeval Titan straight into my deck, and then it just absolutely destroyed when I managed to get it out. And I'm dreading coming up against some of these in drafts because some of them are just crazy. If you get one that's really strong, it's definitely potentially you want to build your deck around it, or look into more kind of synergies while there. If you get say the Knights of Sandoria here, just make sure that you do have a creature that's 1 or less that you want to kind of tutor up. I had someone at my most recent draft as well. They had the Cloud Midgar Mercenary, but they didn't actually draft any equipments to go with it, which is just something that kind of slips your mind a little bit as you're kind of going. It's definitely a card that's worth picking up, but you want to kind of draft potentially equipments to go with it, obviously, because he chooses up equipments. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think. Would you like more of this kind of content as well? I hope you guys had a wonderful day, and goodbye.